Welcome to episode 84 of the Various and Sundry podcast. I am your host, Matt Harmon, joined live from the Vault Studio on the beautiful campus of Grace College and Theological Seminary by my good friend, my colleague, my co-host, and the man who is more refreshed than ever, John Scott Sloat.
Signs are up, Doc. How you doing?
Yes, I'm doing all right. You're fresh off of vacation.
Yeah. Landed on, got back to Indiana on Saturday. So, yeah, just about 9 days in Florida. So,
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Right near the heart of the COVID outbreak in Florida as well.
Okay. All right. So maybe recording in an enclosed studio with you is
I don't know how much our listeners want to know about my medical history. I am vaccinated, so hopefully we're all good there. But we'll see. We'll see.
Okay. It's clear you're aspiring to be the Ronnie Martin of this podcast. Is what you're aspiring to.
To travel that much?
Yes.
Oh goodness. I like traveling. My wife does not like it when I travel though. So.
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, she would prefer to go with you, I would assume.
Yeah, or to have me home. I think that would be her main preference.
I see. I mean, somebody's got to keep up with the grass, right?
Yeah, somebody's got to watch that grass grow.
Yeah. Is that going okay?
Yeah. We're ready for like the fall stuff to happen, right? We're ready to aerate, to what they call top dress. Are you familiar with the term top dress?
No, what is that?
Yeah. You put dirt or compost over the top in aerated holes to introduce organic material to the clay. That way it turns over time and turns into topsoil underneath the ground. It's called top dressing.
Okay. You clearly care far more about grass than I do.
But I have to grow from scratch. Like I had to start with clay and seed. You know, that was what I started with. And so I have to cultivate. Okay. I'm doing Genesis 2, right here.
Yes. Yeah. You're basically working and keeping.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah. Serving your priestly role. Well, if you would like to connect with us, you can find us on different social media platforms. We are on Twitter at V&S We have an email address, variousandsundrypodcast@gmail.com. We are on Facebook, Various and Sundry Podcast. And we are available on YouTube as well, Various and Sundry Podcast there also. We would love for you to go to whatever platform you use to access the show, to leave us a 5-star rating and a review. So especially if you're using the Apple platform, that does help gain visibility for the podcast.
Yeah, and we work the algorithm that way.
That's right.
Yeah.
We are all about manipulating that algorithm there. So
absolutely.
Yeah, so join us in our crusade to do that. But so we recorded last episode a week early, basically. So we're a couple weeks removed from having an episode where we're recording. This is on a Monday afternoon. Episode drops tomorrow, so relatively current. So there's been some stuff going on in the world of sports. The Olympics just ended yesterday. Tell me about your intake of the Olympics, John.
Well, it's hard when it's on the other side of the world.
Yeah.
Because particularly in like the modern age with Twitter and just even Google News on my phone will tell me who won before it airs.
Right.
And so I'm able to see it and stuff like that. So that can be a bit frustrating. I think I'm excited for the next Olympics, the next Summer Olympics, 2024 in Paris. I think that we'll be able to be a little bit more current with Paris. But usually it was a couple hours a day, just clicking it on, watching whether it was a basketball game or whether it was – goodness, I think I watched some synchronized swimming, polo.
I believe is it not called artistic swimming now?
Did they change the name?
I think they changed the name.
Okay.
And they also have rhythmic gymnastics, which is essentially the land-based version
of gymnastics. Is that with ribbons?
The land-based version of synchronized swimming or artistic, because you got people working together. It's synchronized.
I did not see that.
So.
Yeah, I think I watched some wrestling, some 3-on-3 basketball, some track and field. My wife had a high school friend who was in the 10,000 meter event, placed 10th.
Okay. Hey, just making it to the Olympics is amazing.
And her goal, from what I understand, was to make the top 10. So that was very exciting.
Yeah.
So we watched quite a bit. How about yourself? Did you watch a lot of Olympics?
It went in sort of phases. So early on I was watching some, and then just life circumstances, busyness. But I was I enjoy the Olympics. I think it's one of those realities where you come across some sports that you think, this is an Olympic sport?
Yeah.
Like, for example, race walking. Are you familiar with this?
Yes. I watched a little race walking. Riveting.
Yeah.
Riveting stuff.
Yeah. Well, let's just say that I'm in the middle of I was doing something else, and I got a text from Nate in Ohio saying, "Are you watching this race walking?" No, but sure, I'll throw it on and see what's going on. And a guy from Poland won this, came out of nowhere, But have you ever watching them do race walking?
They really get the arms going, right?
Pumping the arms like crazy, and the rule is basically it has to be. You always have to be touching the ground. Like one of your feet has to be touching the ground at all times. So they have these monitors, these judges that are constantly watching, and they give out warnings if you essentially break into a run or a jog. It's just fascinating. It's just such an awkward motion, because these guys are pumping their arms, and that their feet are doing the brisk little walk thing. And it's a 50-kilometer race.
That's a big race.
That's 31 miles.
Yeah, that's a big race.
And they do it in 4 hours.
Yeah.
That's crazy. But I think part of the reason that it's interesting to me is the fact that my wife had a cousin. So actually it was her dad's cousin. So whatever that makes that, like second cousin, first cousin once removed.
Yeah.
I don't understand those. I don't.
The family relationships?
I don't understand how cousins work beyond just simple first cousins. Once you get into second and third cousins and first cousins once removed, I lose track. I don't get it. In any case, this relative of my wife, he made the Olympics in race walking.
Really?
In like the late 60s, early 70s.
Huh. Oh, I thought it was a relatively new sport.
No.
Oh, okay.
No. So, he was an Olympic athlete. He finished like 19th or something. But
that's not bad. There's a lot of people in those races.
Yeah. But race walking. I mean, do you look at that and go, I think if I worked out a little bit, I could probably be okay at that? Or do you think it's more complicated than you realize?
I probably would. No, I would not go. I want to be good. I think the one Olympic sport I hold on to that I could one day potentially do is curling. That's like the one thing that I'm like, boy, if I really got into this and I went to not that I've ever done it, but gone to the curling gym in Fort Wayne and practiced. Maybe. Those games like that, shuffleboard, bocce ball.
Yes.
I tend to be pretty good. But
well, and when you look at the people involved in curling,
they're in their 40s.
Yes, and it's not like they are, how shall we put this, impressive physical specimens.
Yeah, they're not playing with their shirt off, in other words. Yeah.
They're not exactly cut or anything, like jacked up. So So the USA did end up winning the medal count, both total medals and gold medals, by 1.
Yes, over the Chinese, who were complaining that on all the American broadcasts they put the total medal count at the top and not the gold medal count at the top. And then we beat them in the gold medal count anyway.
Indeed.
I participated somehow.
You're an American.
Yeah.
You're an American. So and both the men's and the women's basketball teams did win gold despite some early struggles.
Yep.
The men's team figured it out and managed to win gold there. So the NBA draft also happened during our most recent sort of hiatus. Did the Knicks pick anybody up?
I know they picked up a couple of guys, but I don't know who. I know nothing about it.
Well, that makes for a short topic.
Yeah.
And your Mets picked up Javi Baez from the
Javi
Cubs.
Baez, who's hurt,
yeah,
by the way. I don't know if you saw this.
The Cubs basically had a going out of business sale from what I can tell.
Yes. They got rid of all their big contracts, all their big players.
Yeah.
I think just about everybody's gone. And they got a bunch of prospects in return. So they're trying to rebuild this.
Yeah, that's going to make Jordan in Indiana sad probably.
That's going to make a few people in Indiana sad. And the Mets, since getting him, Javi Baez is now hurt.
Yeah.
And the Mets have lost, I think, 7 of 9. So I think we've gone out of first place, and I think we might be in last place now in the division.
Wow.
Like it happened that quick.
Ouch. Okay, and we're both excited for the start of football season.
Yes, football season's around the corner.
Yeah, the Buckeyes kick off in 4 weeks from this Thursday, I think. September 2nd is when they kick off. So
we had our first preseason NFL game.
Yeah.
Hall of Fame game was this.
Did you watch any of it?
Nope.
I don't even think I realized it was on until a little ways into it, and just kind of clicked over, but didn't see any names I recognized.
Well, I think the big takeaway was Jerry Jones went on the Fox set with Jimmy Johnson.
Oh,
like they were. Yeah, isn't that interesting? Did you not know this?
No. Did they just stare coldly at each other?
Well, they famously have a terrible relationship, right?
Right.
And I think one of the guys on the Fox set asked Jerry Jones, "Will you be putting Jimmy in the Ring of Honor?"
Oh gosh.
And Jerry very diplomatically goes, "Well, it's hard to see somebody that's accomplished more for the Cowboys." Starts speaking wonderfully about him, and then Jimmy goes, "While I'm alive." And Jerry said yes.
Okay.
And so it sounds like maybe there's some water under the bridge happening here. But yeah, it was apparently pretty – that was the big headline coming out of that game because it was I think Dallas versus the Steelers maybe. And it was pretty uncomfortable in that set.
Yeah. Well, on the football front for me, the biggest news with Ohio State football is the fact that and this probably didn't necessarily reach your radar since you're not a college football guy.
Mm-hmm.
But so Ohio State has a recruit named Quinn Ewers, who was the number 1 rated player for the 2023 class.
So not
2022. Sorry, 2022.
So next fall.
Right. And basically, his rating by the recruiting services is essentially equivalent to Trevor Lawrence, and like basically, the word on the street is like this is a can't miss NFL guy. He is
Andrew
unreal.
Luck, Peyton Manning. Yeah. Okay.
Well, because of the change in the name, image, likeness rules, he decided to because of where his academic status was at, he decided to enroll at Ohio State this fall. So to enroll a year early to reclassify as this current year, as a 2021.
Okay.
Because he has like 1 English credit remaining to finish his high school, or maybe he finished it over the summer. Like basically he was planning on enrolling in January, was able to get it so he could enroll in this fall. And his motivation for this was so he could start making money from his name, image, and likeness, which he couldn't have done as a high school senior in Texas.
Wow.
So he is the highest rated recruit that's ever been to Ohio State. Ever.
Whoa.
Which is saying something.
Mm-hmm.
But it's totally thrown the quarterback race into chaos because they have 3 other guys that are competing for the job right now. And now you bring in the highest rated recruit in program history, essentially. Now, he hasn't had any of the spring or the summer stuff, so he's not going to start game 1. But there's all this drama now, like could he start middle of the season?
Sure, yeah.
And what does that do to the quarterback race and that sort of thing? But it's fascinating to see it's all driven by he could enroll and start making money off of his name, image, and likeness right away. And there was talk that he could make upwards of close to $1 million. He hasn't even thrown a pass.
I thought you were going to tell me he decided to transfer to a state where he could make more money.
No.
Okay.
No. But, I mean, if you're Ohio State, what do you say? It's not ideal to have him enroll now because it messes up the quarterback, the three they got.
Oh, yeah.
Like it messes up.
Oh, yeah.
But you can't say, sorry, don't come this year. He's just like, fine, I'll go somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
But Ohio State's going to lose at least. So now of the 4 quarterbacks in that room right now, you've got 2 true freshmen and 2 redshirt freshmen. They're going to lose at least 2 of those before it's all said and done. 2 of them are going to transfer out.
Yeah, it only makes sense.
But just funny to see how that's all – how the name, image, likeness stuff. It is the wild, wild west stuff. It is.
Yeah.
It's and you've got all this conference realignment. Did we talk about that? We just started talking about Texas and Oklahoma going to the SEC.
Yeah, and now they're in what year does it start?
I think 2025, but there's no way it's going to last that long.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way. Money will be exchanged. They'll be gone. And by the fall of 2023 is my guess. They'll be playing in the SEC. So
the farewell Big 12.
Yeah, it's all over but the crying.
Yeah.
So there's talk that Kansas is close to joining the Big Ten now, which is
Which
actually
Kansas? Jayhawks?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Great for basketball, not for football.
No.
They're atrocious in
Yeah.
football. So in any case, I think that kind of covers where we're at on sports, don't you?
I think so.
Yeah. I think we're good here. So what's our main topic for today, John?
Well, we're talking humility, Doc.
Why are we doing that?
I have no idea. It was your idea.
You're right. It is my idea. But I mean, here's why I wanted to talk about it.
Okay.
I mean, besides it just being a good topic.
It's a good topic, yeah.
You and I have both been eagerly consuming the Rise and Fall of Mars Hill podcast.
Oh, yeah.
And, just the fascinating train wreck that Mark Driscoll was and still is.
Still is, yeah.
And one of the things that has struck me as a result of that podcast is how important and valuable it is for leaders to be humble and to act humble as well. And so I thought it would be good for us to talk a little bit about humility, because I do think there are some misconceptions about humility, and it does run counter to our cultural drift. I think in terms of, especially if you're in the social media world, of promote yourself, build a platform,
build a brand,
yeah. All those sorts of things, and I think what the Bible has to say about humility is a necessary correction to some of those things. So that's why I wanted to talk about it.
Okay. Can we, on the Mark Driscoll stuff, did you listen to the most recent branding episode, right?
Yeah.
Aqua Fantasy? I had to go Google that to see, what is this place?
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Well, yeah, you got to describe it at least briefly then.
I mean, it is a resort. I think it's safe to say 5-star. And they have, from the website, it looks like they have 5 or 6 of them around, sounds like Turkey seems to be where they're located. One in Ephesus, which I assume is the one they were at. And basically it's like resort / water park / beachfront private cabana sorts of things.
Okay.
Where you get a gazebo and you have your own portion of the sea right there for you, and then you have your own pool behind your gazebo, and people are bringing you stuff, and it's all very very nice. And then forcing, and that's one thing to stay there, that's if you've saved your pennies and done this.
Sure.
It's another thing for you and your family to go there and send your whole team to a flea-ridden motel across town.
Yeah, totally.
So anyway,
so let's talk a little humility here. What do you think are some misconceptions? Because I do think they're out there in terms of people maybe misunderstand what humility is.
Yeah, I think a misconception, and I think it's impossible to talk about humility without talking about pride as well.
Sure.
I think those things are kind of polar opposites, right? They go hand in hand. But some misconceptions. I think one that I naturally think of is that humility is being down on yourself, just being like, I'm no good at this. I'm just nobody, sort of doing this thing. Mm-hmm. I see that as a misconception of humility, a misunderstanding of it. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's probably the most common misconception about humility is that it is just a constant running yourself down kind of thing of like not it's almost as if there's this fear of if I acknowledge that I might actually be a little bit good at something, that's being prideful. Mm-hmm. And it's not. So you feel like I just have to constantly talk myself down and be like, I'm worthless. I'm nothing. I can't do anything. And that is not a biblical view of humility, I don't think.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's just as, and you could push back on this if you like, it's just as self-centered as the guy who's like, I'm awesome, I'm great. It's just a I'm not good version of that.
Sure.
It's the same thing, but destroyed by failure or.
Yeah, it still remains such an emphasis on self that it is actually, ironically, can be thought of as it is a version of pride actually, because it's still very self-oriented, still very self-focused. You've got another misconception here down on the rundown here. Ends justify the means. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I know I was given over to this thinking. I think there may be some of this thinking even in somebody like a Mark Driscoll where, but I'm doing so much good, therefore my pride, it cancels out my pride, so to speak. Mm-hmm. The ends of what we're qualifying for justify some of the means that are taking place.
Okay.
And maybe that's not a misconception about humility, but I think it does happen, and it is a rationalization I think at times we've all made, if we're being honest with ourselves. Like, well, the good I'm doing is okay, or the pride I have right now is okay because X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
And I think that's dangerous. I think there's a potential slippery slope there.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I think from my perspective, a starting point for a good understanding of what humility is, and I think I've sort of loosely borrowed this wording from CJ Mahaney's book on humility. Okay. So I don't know if this is exact wording, but it's
we're
close.
All about the paraphrase here.
Well, I just want to make sure that I'm appropriately citing my sources here, but it's something along the lines of viewing ourselves exactly as God views us, which, understood that way, still allows for I'm an image bearer.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I've been created with value and dignity and those sorts of things. So I'm not worthless. I'm not nothing.
Yeah.
But I'm also not God. And so when you put it in that perspective of viewing yourself exactly as God views you, that helps, I think, give you a proper sense of, well, any abilities and talents that I have or any accomplishments are a byproduct of something that God has given me or God has enabled me to do. So for me to get all full of myself as if this came from me apart from God is foolish and silly ultimately.
Yeah, and there is a difference between being prideful, being all about yourself, and being proud of an accomplishment, right? Right? I think you would agree that there's a place to be like, my goodness, I worked hard and I accomplished, a degree or I accomplished this thing. There's a place for that.
Yes.
Without being sinful.
I agree. So it's not like we can't ever find some enjoyment or satisfaction out of, I did this, I worked hard, I put in the effort, here's the result.
Yeah.
This was a good thing. This is something that it's okay for me to take enjoyment from. Of course, because we're all by nature sinful human beings, that easily gets twisted and warped.
Yeah, absolutely. One resource you mentioned, CJ Mahaney's book on humility. Another resource is a chapter of Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis called I believe The Great Sin, and he talks about pride and humility. It's opposite. So that's a really helpful resource. If you've never read Mere Christianity, it is excellent. It is a wonderful read.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot more we can say here. I'd like to hit on some key biblical texts that help us see to some degree maybe what humility is and why it matters. We won't necessarily read all of these, but actually I wanted to start with one that is maybe not always brought into the discussion, but I think it can be helpful, is Numbers 12:3, which is basically a parenthetical aside that notes that Moses was the most humble man on the earth, which is an interesting comment to make.
Yeah.
Because it's not like Moses was just this quiet, kind of passive person, which I think, again, that can be associated with humility of, well, to be humble is to be quiet and to be, submissive or passive and not take action, not assert yourself in any way. And, here you have Moses, who was the leader of God's people, very active, took initiative, was, front and center in front of God's people, and yet the most humble man.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to bring that to bear just because I think sometimes our cultural perspective on what humility looks like is something that people are like, oh, that means you're kind of a quiet, passive person. And, well, that doesn't describe Moses.
Yeah. Yeah. Moses, the leader of God's people. Moses, the paradigmatic prophet of the Old Testament.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's the ESV uses the word meek to describe him there. That's a great word.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there are a lot of texts that we can go to. One worth considering, I think, reflecting on a little bit is Proverbs 3, in part because it shows up in the New Testament a couple times, or at least there are allusions to it. So Proverbs 3, verse 34, toward the scorners he is scornful, but to the humble he gives favor. And so you see that language picked up in places like James chapter 4 and in 1 Peter chapter 5. I'll go ahead and hit up James. You want to get 1 Peter ready for us there?
Yeah.
Even though they're similar, I think they make slightly different points. So in James 4, you have verse 6, God gives more grace, therefore it says, God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. Submit yourselves therefore to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. And I've always just been struck by that language of God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. And you just find yourself thinking, do I really want to put myself in a position where God opposes me?
Yeah.
Probably not. Probably not. You got that 1 Peter text?
Yeah, 1 Peter 5, 6 to 9. Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time he may exalt you, casting all your anxieties on him because he cares for you. Be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. Resist him, firm in your faith, knowing that the same kind of suffering are being experienced by your brotherhood throughout the world.
What I think is interesting about that particular text is it's in the context of Peter's admonitions to leaders, elders in the church, that elders should be humble people. And I'm struck by the fact that in both that James passage and in that 1 Peter passage, that humility is brought up in the context of resisting the devil.
I was about to bring that up. Yeah, both passages bring up resisting the devil. Interesting.
Yeah, and isn't it? I find this in some ways fascinating. And again, we both kind of have the Mars Hill podcast on the brain because so everything kind of bounces off that at some level, doesn't it? But the vision that Driscoll tried to paint of this sort of this version of masculinity, of tough, macho, kind of old school football coach, I'm going to fire you up to run through a brick wall kind of mentality, seems to be the exact opposite of what this text is pushing towards. That the strategy for fighting the devil is not, I'm going to kick his rear end, to fire yourself up.
Mark Driscoll would not have said
I know,
rear
exactly.
end. Yes,
I don't have the little button that bleeps out the expletives. So, but I think sometimes guys can take that sort of cultural view and be like, let's go take on. It's like the path to defeating the work of Satan in your life is humility. A recognition of, on my own, I can't. On my own, he's going to kick my rear end.
Yeah.
But if I submit myself to God, I have Jesus, strength and his spirit fighting on my behalf. And just thinking about that marking a spiritual leader, that sense of humility. And my wife and I were reflecting on this, and she made the interesting point of, we are people who very much value doctrine. And of course, I'm not in any way downplaying doctrine. But I think part of what that podcast has helped us more firmly crystallize is the gift and the necessity of humble leadership. And just how thankful we are that at the church that we are members, you and I and my wife obviously, that we have a humble shepherd, not a self-promoting, not someone interested in building a brand or a platform or anything like that, but humbly caring for the flock, feeding the flock. And that doesn't mean he's not bold. Sometimes I think we pair those two as opposites.
Absolutely.
Well, you can be humble or you can be bold. No, actually, you can be both. So I think those passages struck me in thinking about this topic because they specifically connect with the issue of leadership and also resisting the schemes of the devil.
Absolutely. No, that's a good word. We've mentioned a couple resources, Doc. Do we want to reiterate them here before we move on to our athlete, or anything else to say on the topic before we?
I want to hit briefly. I'll mention in passing Philippians 2.
Yeah, I was kind of waiting for you to go to Philippians 2, and you just kept not going there.
I read the commentary. Go by the commentary. Read the section. I'm in print on that. So does that sound – that probably doesn't sound very humble, does it?
Yeah. Read the commentary. Read my published works.
Exactly. As I'm talking about humility, as I flex about the fact that I've written a commentary on Philippians there you go. Anyway, but in that text, I will just note that in Philippians 2, that that humility is supposed to characterize us because it was a defining characteristic of Christ himself.
Absolutely.
But I want to actually probably end our discussion on this with Isaiah 66, 1 through 2, I go back to this passage pretty regularly when it comes to the subject of humility. Isaiah 66:1, "Thus says the Lord, heaven is my throne, the earth is my footstool. What is the house that you would build for me, and what is the place of my rest? All these things my hand has made, and so all these things came to be, declares the Lord. But this is the one to whom I will look, he who is humble and contrite in spirit and trembles at my word." That verse, that section always just resonates with me of I want to be someone who God looks to, who he sets his favor upon, that he looks favorably upon me. And that I want to be someone who trembles at his word, who takes it seriously, who internalizes it. And I think that's just one of those texts I keep coming back to in terms of trying to provoke humility and remind myself of the value of it.
Yeah. No, that's a good word.
So we mentioned a couple of resources already, so I don't know.
Yeah, let me just say them again,
Sure.
and then we'll move on to our athlete. CJ Mahaney wrote a book called Humility. That's out there. You have True Greatness on here. Is that the subtitle?
That's the subtitle.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. And then C.S. Lewis, Mere Christianity. I would of course recommend that book. There's a chapter in there called The Great Sin where he talks about pride and humility. And that's very, very good as well. So, Doc, we ready to move on to athlete?
Let's do it.
Okay. So we're at episode, what is this, 84?
Yeah.
We have a lot of options.
Yeah. I mean, we're in the wide receiver world here.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Let's begin. Randy Moss.
yes. So wide receiver from 98 to 2012. Probably best known for his time with the Vikings. He did spend 1 or 2 years in New England with Tom Brady.
Yeah.
He was on their Super Bowl losing team. The team went 19-1.
Yep. And the one was the Super Bowl. Yep.
Yeah. And just huge personality.
Yes. Although, and then had some time with the Raiders that I don't think went very well. But I think became understood his role guy in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Because he had some time with San Francisco there as well.
I remember seeing him in college. He went to Marshall. So
yeah.
at the time, Marshall was not even a 1A school. It was the next notch down, which is like which was the playoff division before the big boys went to the playoffs. But he clearly belonged at a top level D1 school, but he had some off the field issues. Like he was supposed to go to Florida State, maybe even Notre Dame was in on the recruiting of him, and they didn't want to. Eventually, they figured out, he's a little too much in terms of off the field stuff. So he was a man among boys.
And who was throwing him touchdowns at Marshall?
That'd be your boy Chad Pennington.
Chadwick Pennington. That's right.
So, yeah. And he's now been a commentator for ESPN for.
And I'll say this. I did not like him as a player.
Okay.
I really enjoy him as a commentator. I do think he's fun.
Okay. All right. Next athlete.
Shannon Sharp.
Okay.
Shannon Sharp. Broncos and the Ravens from 1990 to 2003.
Yeah. Hall of Famer and someone who probably now is as well known for being a sports media personality.
I think so. He's on Fox Sports 1, and that's certainly lesser known than ESPN.
Sure.
But yeah, he has a famous show on there and has made some headlines in the last year.
Yeah.
Calling up athletes in the middle of his show and
oh, that's right.
And breaking news stories he shouldn't be breaking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's opposite of Skip Bayless on that show,
which means you just lose all credibility.
Yeah. Totally. Next one.
Sterling Sharp, his father, correct? Brother. Excuse me. 88 to 94, absolutely. Wide receiver was a very good player.
Yeah, had his career cut short. It's only a 6 or 7 year career there. Played by a neck injury. Still made the Hall of Fame. Was one of Brett Favre's favorite targets.
All right, Andre Reed, was the Bills wide receiver.
Familiar with him?
A little bit, yes.
I mean, he was part of that Bills team in the 90s that made 4 Super Bowls and lost them all.
Yes,
Terrific.
I remember him towards the end. 98 is pretty much the first football season we're getting into that I was paying attention.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
And then basketball, Chris Webber.
Yeah, not my favorite player. Wore 84, briefly for 1 year maybe. I remember him most in terms of his NBA career for being on that Kings team that probably should have beaten the Lakers in the Western Conference Finals. That had Peja Stojakovic. It had Jason Williams, the point guard. That was just a fun team to watch and should have beat the Lakers probably that year. And then our Ohio State entry here, Bob Brudzinski, a defensive end from 73 to 76, All-American, first-round draft pick, and most notably a member of the National Polish American Sports Hall of Fame.
Of course. Well, that's an elite status there.
I mean, that's something
that's a rare club.
Neither of us could ever aspire
I hear instead of like a suit jacket for getting in there, you just get a string of sausages.
Send your critical comments to at John_Sloat.
There it is on Twitter.
Okay. All right. So who do you like?
I like Randy Moss.
Yep, I agree.
Okay. Wow.
That was pretty simple.
That was way easier than I thought it would be.
Well, he also had that memorable when he played for the Vikings when he scored the touchdown against Green Bay. Was it in the playoffs where he acted like he was taking his pants down and taking a
he mooned him.
Yeah.
He mooned him. His favorite play of mine is when he was with the Vikings and he had a comeback route and he caught the ball and was being tackled and impromptu threw it over his shoulder to a teammate who was behind him who ran it for a touchdown.
Okay.
My favorite Randy Moss play.
He was virtually unguardable in his prime.
Yeah.
All right. One thing you liked.
So my wife and I just got back from St. Augustine, which was my one thing I liked last week. More specifically this week in St. Augustine, there is a frozen ice truck that is there that we found that was amazing. First of all, they give you I know the listeners can't see my hands, but
this is an oral medium.
Yes. It is massive, the amount of frozen ice. And I got a root beer float flavored. They put soft serve ice cream at the bottom, put root beer flavor frozen ice on top, and then covered it in sweetened condensed milk.
Okay.
Delicious.
Okay.
Amazing. Other than the 7 brain freezes I got in the midst of eating it, it was fantastic.
Yes.
And how about yourself?
Yes. So continuing with the theme from the previous episode, we had good friends of ours, Rich and Lori. Friends from college.
Oh, yes.
He is a professor at Spring Arbor up in the state up north. Mm-hmm. Was the best man at my wedding. So we go way back, and we see him once a year. Every summer we get together and just had a great time hanging out with them. We actually went out on the Grace boat. Have you been out on the Grace boat?
Wow. No, I've never been on the Grace boat.
Okay. That was my first time out there.
Really?
Had a student who was who drove us around. Which it could feel a little risky putting your life in the hands of.
Depends on the student.
Yeah, exactly. And he did a great job driving us around, and we didn't opt for the tubing or skiing option. We just wanted to take a nice little pleasant stroll. Stroll, cruise. Cruise is the term.
Cruise, yeah,
on the lake, and then so we kind of did a lap, and then he's like, "You guys want to go fast?" Sure. So. Got a little aggressive with it, which was fun. Yeah.
Evening stroll, afternoon?
Evening, like 6:30.
Evening on the lake is nice.
That's lovely.
It gets still out there. Yeah.
Absolutely lovely. So, yeah. So shout out to him. And for those who didn't know, Grace College has a boat.
A couple.
2, yeah. Donated. We should stress they were both donated, not purchased with institutional
signs are looking up. Yeah.
Gosh. That's one way of thinking about it. What an episode. So we've talked some Olympics, some the Mets troubles. We've talked some football. We've talked about humility and how I'm not humble. We've talked Randy Moss who was definitely not humble.
Definitely not humble. Definitely not humble.
We've talked to some. Did you call it like shaved ice? What?
It's frozen ice.
Frozen ice.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any other kind?
I don't think so, but that's how they phrased it.
Okay.
And I can't remember the specific name of the truck.
Okay.
It was Mr. Morgan's, maybe. I don't know.
Not Captain Morgan.
No. No, that would be not pod.
No, it
not
would
pod
not.
kosher. Yeah.
Oh, we better wrap this up before we say something that we will regret even more. So, I think we have covered our various and sundry topics. You ready to call mission accomplished?
Yes.
Mercifully so. All right. All that's left to say then is until next time, the Lord bless y'all real good.
Later.